Mac Jones' ceiling has always been the question, not necessarily his floor. So I expected him to understand the game, anticipate the game, be able to throw the football into tight windows short, but not necessarily push it down because that's physical.
Oh, boy. Late night with KJ here on WEEI 617-779. Text line 37937. That's Ryan Clark on ESPN pretty much saying that Tua is better than Mac Jones. I'm not going to jump off of that ledge right there. Because while Tua may be more physically gifted, it doesn't mean he's better coached. It doesn't mean that he can adjust to situations better because he's had the yips. He's been Uncle Rico on Napoleon Dynamite. Except for he can't throw it as far as Uncle Rico. That's been the joke.
Can't throw a football over the mountains.
Yeah, well, look, exactly. Maybe tetherball, Tua may be better than Mac Jones, but right now, I would say they're even. And now some things may reveal themselves this year of who's progressed and who's regressing. The hope here in New England is that Mac Jones is growing and not regressing, and that you would think that Tua may be at a frozen point because that's the whole worry in Miami is that Tua's not growing. Like literally people have their watch set for the end of season to see what to do with Tua. Like this is Tua's last chance in Miami. That's not the case with Mac Jones. And but again, I think the Dolphins have more weapons to win more games, and that's why maybe Miami finishes ahead of the Patriots. But if you look at the odds in Vegas at BetMGM, they both have even money on both the Patriots and the Dolphins finishing second. So what they're telling you with those numbers is Tua may still suck, and Mac Jones may catch a break, or Mac Jones freezes and regresses, and Tua gets a little better. That's exactly what I'm sitting here saying. Before I get into how these teams will finish in the AFC, including the Patriots, I got to get to the news that's just hit WEEI.com, well, really within the last hour or so, is that Bill Belichick has announced that there will be no named offensive coordinator, and at least it's not Joe Judge or Matt Patricia, and that's going to be all the questions asked. So there's always going to be kind of this Wizard of Oz, who's behind the curtain? Is it Richard Pryor or is it really the Wizard of Oz? Okay, that was the Wiz. Who's behind the curtain? If it's Belichick, he's not going to tell you if he was right. He's not going to tell you it's wrong. It's going to be a sleight of hand. But nobody for the defense? Okay, Bill's already in charge of the defense. And here's why I think there's no named defensive coordinator. Well, because Junior's not ready yet. He's just not. I want to give it to him so bad. I don't know if any of you have ever worked for your fathers, where there's a family business. And the first time they think that you might be ready tends to be like when you're a little bit younger. But all you really want to do is still ask them for money and go out and talk to girls because there's a little bit of money to get there. And he's not ready. Then when you find out the girl doesn't really want to be with you, or you need to do something, or she wants more things, and you realize it requires more work, that's when you finally get it. That could be the case with Steve Belichick. He's probably just not there yet. Because I think ultimately Bill wants to name him defensive coordinator. But I think Bill also knows that if he does it now, and the offense that he's got to give a whole lot of attention to as the Wizard of Oz, the Wizard of Offense. Okay, I'll stop. But yeah, so knowing that he has to give more attention to the offense, he just can't hand the defense over to his son, because the last thing Bill wants to be is in a press conference where the defense is leaking oil and transmission fluid and the offense is struggling and there's no OC or DC, so he's got to answer for everything. So you kind of keep your reins on the defense. And probably with some of these new guys coming in, some of these rehab vets like Jabil Peppers, these guys want to know that they're playing for Bill Belichick and not Steve yet. Now, maybe in a year or two, playing for Steve and Steve figures some things out and gets it done, that's a real possibility. A few nights ago, I ranked, the AFC defense, and while I didn't think the Patriots would be the second best in the league again and number 2 in the AFC, they still will be a top 10 defense. But in terms of not naming an offensive coordinator, I looked at Bill's past, and when he was the first 4, the 5 years he was in Cleveland, the first 4, he didn't have a named offensive coordinator. But as I said last night when Dondero and I were here for Mutt, that, when Bernie Kosar and Vinny Testaverde are your quarterbacks, you already have some type of knowledge of what you want to do, how you want to approach the game. You have people, you just have consultants. You don't need to have a coordinator. You have consultants. I still believe that Mac Jones in his growth process needs a coordinator, because if there's no coordinator there, then you're telling me that Mac is so advanced that he doesn't need a coordinator. It's like a rapper saying, man, I did a song with no guest appearances. No guest appearances. Then someone says, man, you know who would have been nice on that song? That's like, we might be saying that, like, hey, maybe you should have gone with an offensive coordinator. So, again, it's going to be very interesting. It's been a very quiet off season in terms of how loud the fan base is. I think there's just been this general hope for the best, expect the worst, however that goes. I'm a positive guy. Expect the best. Well, you don't expect the best and hope for the worst, but, expect the worst and hope for the best. And coming up here at about 10:45, I'll get into some of BetMGM's parlays. There's some nice first 4-game parlays. Joe, do you do parlays?
Not a parlay person.
Not a parlay guy. Parlays are fun because it's like turning over cards, like the river card in Texas Hold'em, like the excitement of the next thing unfolding, right? Now it all collapses under if one goes under, but there's a nice parlay that shows you that Vegas it got some pretty interesting numbers out on the Patriots. It's fascinating. That's coming in 20 minutes. So how will the AFC shake out, and who goes to the Super Bowl, right? So when I'm ranking teams, I'm not saying who's going to finish as the number 1 seed and then the playoffs start. I'm telling you who I think is going to win the AFC conference, and that will be my number 1 team. And then the teams you hear descending are pretty much how they go out of the playoffs. Pretty much every team, would be a playoff team going down through. And I'll just start with number 1, because if, the Patriots are at the top, then I would do it in the reverse. So Patriots will come later. Number 1, I believe the Denver Broncos will win the AFC championship. I believe they upset the Bills, who's number 2. I'll get to the Bills in a second. The acquisition of Russell Wilson is not about winning every down. It's about winning key downs. And at this point in Russell Wilson's career, he doesn't have to be a 300-yard-a-game passer. He doesn't have to rush for 80 yards. But if he has a key run for 20 yards that keeps a clock running, ball control, because they've got an amazing running tandem there. They've got awesome wide receivers. Their defense is lights out. They've got corners that are unreal. They have all the pieces that Russ doesn't really need to cook, like those toaster ovens, right? Like when microwaving, which like what's bad about microwaves? Sometimes when they go bad and the wheel doesn't spin anymore. I'm going through this fixing one in my house. Like you have to learn where to point in the microwave to get the food hot. Well, you don't have to let Russ cook like that anymore. Right? You just like, you know what? I just need to put you in this part of the microwave, get hot right here, and we win the ball game and move on to next week. Because we can run the ball, we can throw the ball effectively to tight ends, with the tight end, with the receivers, out of the backfield, run with the backfield. They are stacked, absolutely stacked, and I think they are the upset in the AFC because I have the Bills at number 2. And the reason why I have the Bills at number 2 is because I'm just going to go with history. They're choke artists. I'm sorry. While there's a part of me that's feeling that, I would like to see the Bills do well as a kind of a rebuilding and just kind of a reconnective tissue for what's happened in that community earlier this summer. The Bills are going to, I'm sure you'll probably see like a patch of like the number 13 or something like that to show solidarity for those who were murdered at the grocery store. I think the Bills are going to be one of those teams that they feel like, okay, this is our year to get over the hump. Remember they had their issues of like how overtime works with the Chiefs and they put those new rules. It's just like, look, if you get beat, the worst thing you can do is like, okay, can we change a rule? Like, no, you just have to win the game. And I think they will run into a Broncos team that will have their number and have that Russell Wilson cook in that one spot of the microwave that will win the game for them because they'll be able to better ball control than where the Chiefs had to outshoot them last year, who I have at number 3. Now, I have the Chiefs at 3 because I still think they're going to perform, but I think you're going to see a slight step down. Not because Tyreek Hill is gone so much, but because now you know what they want to do, and that's Travis Kelce. There's still no real established run game. The word is still out on Juju Smith-Schuster in terms of his return, and you just have to see how that turns around. 617-779-7937, the text line 37937. I'll continue with the AFC teams and how they will finish in the conference. Let's go to Matt in the car. He wants to talk about Mac Jones. Matt,
all right, number 1.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up, guys? So I can't wait for the annual 6-week Russell Wilson MVP campaign. That's my favorite part of the NFL year. And number two, Mac Jones. I'm not completely sold on Mac Jones. I think he had a decent rookie year. He had a really decent rookie year. But, again, I see what these guys are getting paid, like Kyler Murray, after 3 years. You're really going to give Mac Jones if Mac Jones, takes him far into the playoffs. Like, say if Mac Jones takes him to the Super Bowl next year and maybe wins, are you going to give him $230 million to sit in the pocket and, one bad hit away from...
Oh, no, it's worse because Mac Jones doesn't have to do that this year or next year or even the year after. It's just that the market's going to dictate that he's going to be a $40 million quarterback where there are going to be some guys who have renegotiated for 60, especially someone like Justin Herbert. When his deal is up in 25, he's probably going to reset a market at $60 million a year. Aaron Rodgers will be out. Kyler Murray's 46 is going to look like chump change, and Joe Burrow is up for his money in 25 as well. So if you're the Patriots, you've got like this conundrum that, okay, if you try and make a move to pay Mac Jones 1 year early, which would be a noble thing, right? Like, guy's been serviceable, he's been consistent. Yeah, you haven't been winning, but you haven't necessarily had the entire staff that you wanted to. You've got to get rid of players. You bring some in. The team may be on a trajectory moving forward. And you say, okay, if we try and pay him in 25 and the market gets reset at, say, $65 million a year, you would be like, wait a minute. If you gave Mac $40 million and he's $25 million off, it would work. And it doesn't matter how mediocre he is, And then if you wait until 26, the pending danger is Derek Carr is up for his deal, right? And if Derek Carr just becomes the same guy that we've seen, you're like, okay, well, Mac may be better than Derek Carr, but Derek Carr may say, okay, I'll do a 2-year deal for $100 million at 50 each. And they may go to Mac and say, okay, well, we'll give you 3 years for $100 million, and Mac would sit there and laugh. Especially if he's better than Derek Carr. You're going to give me 3 years and 100? And then we're still talking over 30 mil. So Mac is not getting anything less than 30 mil. Probably somewhere in the 40 mil range. And in fairness to Mac, if I'm not sold on him yet, I would say this. I'd say the jury's still out because there haven't been sellable goods around him. Bill, I think, kind of blew the bunny with the free agents he got last year. He's handicapped by Jonnu Smith and Nelson Aguilar right now. And the only thing you can hope for is these guys play lights out seasons for a contract somewhere else. They're in walk years. And no one's saying, if they have a great season, we want them to stay. For more money? No. All right, how AFC teams will finish in the conference. I've had the Broncos winning the conference in an upset over the Bills. Broncos 1, Bills 2, Chiefs 3. I've got the Chargers at 4. They've shored up their defense enough where if they get into the playoffs, they'll have enough defense and too much offense for a lot of teams, really getting themselves into the Final Four. And like I said, I just talked about Justin Herbert here. He's got weapons on the outside. He's got a strong running game, though. Exeter tends to get a bit hurt a little, gets a little nicked up, and that may be something they address. Maybe they find a running back that's just kind of needs a break that might have been a Belkoff or someone else, but can come in and spell him. That would be my only concern with the Chargers. But, my goodness, you got Khalil Mack. You got J.C. Jackson on the outside. You have Nick Bosa, I'm sorry. Is it Nick or Joey? Joey is the one in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Joey's in Los Angeles.
Nick is in San Francisco, right. So you got Joey Bosa, you got Khalil Mack, you got offense. The Chargers are going to be dangerous. But I think when it comes to, when you're potentially looking at your final 2 games in the AFC, your AFC quarterfinals may be looking like Bills versus Chargers, Broncos versus Chiefs. That would be amazing. And then Broncos versus Bills, right? Like, that would be absolutely crazy. Number 5 is your defending AFC champion, the Bengals. They've shored up the offensive line. They've shored up the defense a little bit. I wonder where Joe Mixon's legs are. They probably need to get a second back behind him because they're going to have to commit more to the run. Their passing game is hard to stop. But look, with receivers, they can get nicked up very easily. It could be a foot, tweak an ankle. And now if you're down to 2 receivers, the Bengals seem a little more human, just as long as it's not like Jamar Chase that's still there. So the Bengals, I still think, will perform well. They get to the playoffs. They've seen it. They've been there. They've done that. They know what it takes. So I have the Bengals at 5. It's KJ Late Night here on WEEI, talking how the AFC will shake down across the entire conference. So I'm now at number 6, and I think it's the Indianapolis Colts. I think the Colts really were the team that was supposed to get in the playoffs and do a lot of damage last year, except for they had damaged goods with Carson Wentz, who they literally, behind Jonathan Taylor, was running over the league. The defense was lights out, and Carson Wentz would start trying to make decisions for himself. I think there was a stat last year that said Carson Wentz was more likely to lose a game in the last 5 minutes than he was to win it in the first 30, right? So meaning what that would really break down to is all the other parts of the entire team would pretty much handle winning the game early on, and Carson Wentz would more likely stink it up at the end. And that's literally what happened in their very last game against the Jaguars, where in a defensive struggle, right, you blow it and you turn the ball over a few times to lose a game 9-6. That's like losing to the Bad News Bears opening weekend of the movie, right? All right. At number 7, I have the Titans. Now, the Titans, they won the AFC South last year, but I think they end up losing that division and become they're a wild card. I do worry about Derrick Henry, like as he's, you see this with all great runners. There's a great season followed by a severe drop-off. I don't think it's going to be a massive one, but if you're talking about Derrick Henry possibly running for only, say, 850 yards, you're like, uh-oh. And his backup is now in Carolina. So we'll see how those things play out. Derrick Henry got hurt last year, and they've always said in the NFL, your healthiest day in the NFL is right before your first game. After that, it goes all downhill. And the way they use him, and there's really no faith in Ryan Tannehill. So everything is going to be on his back. The defense is going to be lights out, but Vrabel, I think, is going to find out that the defense can't completely carry you if you have just a one-dimensional offense.
What about in the locker room? Because remember, Tannehill said it's not his job to mentor Malik Willis, so that might touch a few people off.
Well, Tom kind of intimated that as well about Jimmy. It's like, it's not really my job to get you ready. Like here, it's not my job to show people how to have a personality. I have a personality, but it's not my job to teach other people how to have a personality. That's something you got to learn yourself. And same thing with quarterbacks. So I'm not mad at Tannehill's comments because at the end of the day, the only person Ryan Tannehill really has to look out for is Ryan Tannehill. And the only way he can do that is prove that Malik Willis needs to just watch more. And that and honestly, I think that benefits the Titans as they move forward. If you might move off of Derrick Henry, or Derrick Henry, you see there's a severe drop-off. You may be looking to bring in another running back to supplement him and then get Malik Willis into the game probably in a year. At number 8, I have the Raiders, and this is even kind of a bit shocking to me. But you say, you know what? They've shored up the defense a little bit with Chandler Jones, and I'm not one of those like, hey, one pass rusher doesn't change a defense. But you have like a premier tight end. You've got the best receiver in the league. You've got an excellent quarterback in Derek Carr. I like Derek Carr. It's just a matter of, can the run game come together? Can Josh McDaniels get them to buy into a system that requires a lot of execution and a lot of clear thought? So why I give the Raiders a bit of an edge is because Derek Carr and Devontae Adams played together in college. And if you want an example of that, of why Kirk Cousins always is in a conversation of somewhat looking at, with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, the two of them play together at college. So for them to be on the same page, it doesn't take as long. So for the Raiders, getting Devontae Adams as a receiver isn't so much like, hey, we got this big receiver and now we're going to, now we can do some things. No, you got a big receiver who, has made himself a name in the league, and Derek Carr was his quarterback in college. So that always helps. The Browns at 9, and I put the Browns at 9 because not knowing what Deshaun Watson will or will not be, I think it'll be between 4 and 6 games. They will probably scratch towards the end of the season, maybe finish 9 and 8. But really get hammered at the beginning of the season. I mean, gosh, they say they want to go into camp with 4 quarterbacks. Psh, that's like if a guy had 4 girlfriends, no one could say, "Oh, that is the epitome of commitment." Though that takes a lot of commitment to date 4 people at a time. I know, I've done that. I hope my wife isn't listening. It just didn't happen when I was married. But look, when you have 4 quarterbacks, you don't have any. And I think the Browns are a little now more worried about when Deshaun Watson returns than it probably anticipated. I think it's going to be closer to the 6 weeks. And if it's 6 weeks, you might see a team that starts the season 1-5 And then Deshaun Watson may lose the first game, so they could be 1-6.
You're telling me you don't trust the depth chart of Jacoby Brissett and Josh Rosen?
Yeah. Did those 4 girls trust me to be faithful? Of course I love you. At 10, the Ravens. Now, that may sound low to a lot of people, but I think the argument does have some juice to it about what is Lamar Jackson going to throw to and who is he going to throw to down the field, right? Because in a division where where the Steelers are going to rush the quarterback quickly, you've got the Bengals who can get up and down the field with the ball, and the Browns have a very strong defense. So if everything is in front of you, if you're just going to be tight end dependent and run the ball, it's at some point the whole running away with the ball catches up with you, and if it catches up with you one good time, or even if you don't even get hit, if you tweak an ankle or something, the Ravens will absolutely be horrible. I've got the Dolphins at 11, and I've got the Patriots at 12. This is why I say it's very interesting. I'll get into next why BetMGM kind of has the Dolphins and the Patriots as kind of the second place team in the AFC East. But the wins don't necessarily match up. So I think the Dolphins are going to be a little bit better than the Patriots, but I don't think they'll be that much better that you say, oh, wow, they're now head and shoulders. That's why I say it'll be interesting what happens in that first game and what happens in the last game of the season. So the Dolphins may win game 1, week 1, but game 17, the Dolphins may be in the playoffs. And, they might be like, okay, their seeding might be kind of set. I don't know because of the way the AFC West works. But, game 1 and 17 will be very interesting and will probably answer the question of has Mac passed Tua and is Tua done in Miami after this year? All right, so if you need the rest after that, Steelers 13, Jags 14, Jets 15, Texans 16. All right, it's KJ Late Night here on WEEI, 617-779-7937. Next, we make some money. Parlays here on WEEI.